The rumors of a metal monster. They said something was coming, something the Germans would never expect, something that would crawl across the mud, crush the wire, and silence the machine guns. We didn't believe them. No one did. In the trenches, rumors were as common as lice. Talk of new weapons, of secret battalions, of the war ending by Christmas, all nonsense meant to keep our spirits alive. But this rumor was different. It carried a strange electricity. The officers whispered about it behind their cigarettes. Engineers appeared near the front, measuring the ground, sketching in notebooks, avoiding our eyes. We called it the metal monster. Some said it was a new kind of armored car. Others said it was like a ship, but for the land, with guns poking out from every side. I laughed at the idea of it, a ship on land. We couldn't even move our boots through the Somme mud without losing them, let alone drive a land battleship across it. But the nights grew louder. Far behind the lines, we could hear an unfamiliar rumble. Not artillery. Not the short, sharp bark of the 18-pounders. This was deeper, slower, a steady growl that rolled through the earth. Something heavy was moving out there. The Somme had already eaten too many men. The first assault had been a slaughter. Entire companies disappeared into the wire. The mud itself seemed to drink blood. Every day we watched new faces climb into the trenches, and every evening we watched fewer climb out. Then, one morning, Captain Hardwick called us together. His face was pale, his hands trembling slightly as he unfolded the orders. "Tomorrow," he said, "we attack again, but this time we will not go alone." Behind him, under canvas sheets, stood a line of hulking shapes. The air smelled of oil and hot iron. Someone pulled a corner of the tarp, and for a moment, all we could do was stare. There it was, the rumor made real. A great armored beast, riveted steel plates and blackened treads. It looked like a coffin with a spine, long and narrow, sloped at both ends. Gun barrels protruded from its sides like tusks. A small white insignia marked its flank, HMLS C4. "Tank," someone muttered. The word was strange in our mouths. It didn't sound like a weapon. It sounded unharmful. But even from a distance, you could feel the thing breathing. The faint tremor of its engine, the hiss of steam escaping through metal pores. That night, sleep refused to come. The ground shook in irregular pulses as mechanics tested the engines. Sparks flared in the darkness. The smell of fuel clung to the fog. I watched one of the engineers, a small man with soot on his cheeks, climb into the tank's belly. He had the calm of someone who'd built something terrible and loved it. I asked him, "Will it work?" He smiled faintly. "If it doesn't, lad, God help the poor sods inside." Then he shut the hatch, and the beast groaned like something waking from a long dream. Morning came gray and cold. The Somme Valley was wrapped in smoke. Rain had turned the fields into a sea of mud thick enough to swallow boots and mules alike. But the tanks were there, 5 of them, lined up like prehistoric creatures in chains, each one snorting steam, their iron hides glistening in the weak light. The infantry gathered around, staring. One man crossed himself, another laughed nervously. No one really knew what to expect. When the engines roared to life, the earth shook. The ground seemed to crawl. Birds erupted from the shell-blasted trees. The beasts began to move. Slow, deliberate, unstoppable. Their tracks chewed the mud, crushing the barbed wire as if it were thread. Shell holes swallowed their sides and spat them out again. It was like watching the earth itself come alive. The officers shouted orders. The men cheered. For the first time in months, we felt a flicker of something we'd forgotten. Hope. But as the tanks lumbered forward into no man's land, that hope curdled into awe and fear. You could feel the power of them, the sheer weight of industry turned into a weapon. They moved like gods of metal, indifferent to mud or bullets. And yet there was something unnatural about them, something that didn't belong to the world we knew.
Inside the beast. If hell had walls, they would be made of iron. The first time I climbed into one of those tanks, I thought I was stepping into the future. By the time I climbed out, I realized it was the future's curse. We'd been given orders to assist one of the Mark I's, HMLS Courageous, which had broken down near the line. Its crew was short 2 men, and command needed volunteers. I didn't volunteer. No sane man would. But the captain's eyes found mine, and that was that. When the hatch clanged shut behind me, the air changed. It wasn't air anymore. It was smoke, oil, and sweat. The heat hit first, thick and smothering. The stench came next, fuel, burned grease, men unwashed for days. Then came the sound. God, the sound. The engine filled every inch of space, a roaring furnace heart that never stopped beating. The noise was so loud you didn't hear it, you felt it. It vibrated in your teeth, rattled your skull, pulsed through your bones. You couldn't speak without shouting directly into a man's ear. You couldn't think at all. The space itself was barely large enough to stand. 6 men crammed into a metal box. Driver, gearsman, gunners, commander, mechanic. Everyone moved like ghosts in a coffin, each motion practiced, each gesture deliberate. Every wall burned to the touch. And yet they moved with the calm of men who'd been born there. The driver, a thick-set man named Burke, had his face streaked with soot. He grinned at me through the haze. "Welcome aboard, lad. Mind your head, the beast bites." He wasn't wrong. Every surface was alive. Every bolt, every plate, every chain vibrated with violence. When the engine revved, the whole world tilted, and we swayed like sailors in a storm. Burke pulled the throttle, and the tank lurched forward. My knees hit steel. Sparks rained from somewhere above. The gunners steadied themselves at the sponsons, eyes pressed to narrow slits that served as windows to the inferno outside. Through one slit, I saw the battlefield. A blur of mud and flame. Bodies half buried, smoke rising like ghosts. The ground seemed to ripple beneath us as the treads chewed through it. Every bump sent us crashing into each other, our helmets ringing like bells. "Keep her steady," shouted the commander. "I am steady," Burke barked back. No one laughed. When we fired, the world ended for a second. The entire interior became white noise and light. The gun thundered, smoke filled the chamber, and the air vanished. My ears bled. I could taste metal on my tongue. The casing rolled at my feet, glowing red, before cooling into dull brass. The mechanic muttered a prayer, half lost in the roar. I wiped grime from my eyes and looked again through the slit. Ahead, I saw Germans running, tiny shapes scattering like insects. The tank didn't care. It just rolled on, unfeeling, unhearing, devouring everything in its path. A shell hit nearby, too close. The tank rocked violently, plates shrieking. For a moment, I thought it had cracked open. The mechanic yelled, "Engines hit!" Burke cursed and slammed the levers. The beast groaned, but kept crawling. We were inside a living thing, wounded, furious, unstoppable. Minutes stretched into hours. The heat grew unbearable. Sweat dripped from the ceiling. The engine spat fire. The fumes made us dizzy. Every breath tasted like poison. Two of the men tied rags over their mouths, soaked in water from a canteen that smelled of oil. I thought of the trenches, the mud, the rats, the cold, and realized how different this was. Out there, the danger came from above. In here, it came from within. The gunner collapsed once, coughing black. We dragged him aside, poured what was left of the water over his face. His eyes opened briefly, glazed and distant. "Keep her moving. Don't stop her now," he whispered. So we didn't. The beast roared on, shuddering through no man's land, its body screaming against the strain. We passed over the remains of the wire, over shattered guns, over men who hadn't moved in days. I stopped looking. Every so often, a new sound joined the chaos. The ping of bullets against steel, the hollow drum of ricochet, the whine of a shell skimming too close. Each sound carried the same message: you shouldn't be alive. Inside, time lost meaning. The only rhythm was the engine. The only light came from the cracks between the plates, thin dancing lines of gray, cutting across faces blackened with soot. When we finally stopped, it wasn't by choice. The tank shuddered once, twice, then died with a sigh. The sudden silence was worse than the noise. My ears rang, my lungs burned, and the floor still trembled from memory. The commander opened the hatch. Cold air rushed in like mercy. We climbed out one by one, blinking in the daylight. My hands were black to the wrist. My uniform reeked of fuel and fire. The others looked no better, gaunt, hollow-eyed, each man moving as if the world outside was somehow too big. The tank sat behind us, motionless now, steam rising from its wounds. It had fought, bled, and lived like we had. I felt a strange pang of pity for it, a machine that carried our courage and our fear in equal measure. We sat on the torn earth, watching the smoke drift. Burke spat into the mud. "Well, she did her job." The commander nodded slowly. "Aye, and she'll do it again." He was right. There were already whispers. More tanks on the way, bigger ones, stronger ones. The engineers were learning, improving, evolving. The beast we'd just escaped was only the first generation. I looked back at Courageous, her armor dented and cracked, her treads half buried in the mud. The name, painted on her side, was nearly obscured by soot, but I could still make it out. Courageous. It didn't seem just like a name anymore. It was a prayer. As the sun set over the battlefield, I realized something unsettling. We'd built these machines to save men from slaughter, to end the stalemate, to make war clean, efficient, mechanical. But as I stood there, covered in oil and ash, I knew the truth. We hadn't ended the slaughter. We had only changed its shape. And somewhere in that metal carcass behind me, in the gears, the bolts, the burning heart of it, I felt the birth of something that would outlive us all. The machine had learned to kill, and it had learned it from us. The legacy of steel. The war ended, but the silence never did. Years have passed since I last saw the fields of France, but sometimes, when the wind howls through the city streets, I can still hear the low, grinding roar of those engines, the heartbeat of the beasts we built. They told us the tanks would bring victory. They did. They told us the tanks would end the war. They didn't. What they ended was something else entirely. The old world. The first time I saw a tank, it was a wonder. The last time, it was a warming. After the Somme, the tanks became more than machines. They became symbols. Men spoke of them with awe and fear, as if they were creatures of myth, invincible, unstoppable, forged from the fury of nations. They rolled through the mud and